Hi, everybody, and welcome to The Crunch. I'm Rebecca Wettemann, and this is Patrick here. Happy Election Day. Boy, a lot of uncertainty in the air today, and certainly a lot of uncertainty as we look at earnings for tech, right? We've got a busy week this week with earnings continuing with Five9 and NICE announcing Microsoft last week. So it'll be really interesting to see what happens. It's also an interesting announcement since our last show, a partnership between Rimini Street and ServiceNow. Really interesting to see ServiceNow talking about being that modernizing pane of glass, Rimini being the modernize your ERP from the outside in, and those two partnering together to really bring some interesting offerings to market. So it'll be interesting to see how that evolves. But coming back to uncertainty, I think one of the things that we think about in uncertainty a lot as we look at what's going to happen next year is hiring plans, right? How do we think about hiring, and how do we make sure that we're getting the right hire in the right place? So I'm really delighted today to have David Nason on, CEO of HireBrain, to talk about how they're thinking about what's working with hiring, what's not working, and how do we sort of solve those age-old problems of having more predictable performance in the hires that we bring on. So welcome, David.
Thank you so much. I appreciate you having me.
Absolutely. Absolutely. So I know you've talked a lot about hiring not working, right? So maybe you can talk first, though, a little bit about your background and sort of those age-old problems with hiring that you say we've thrown a lot of tech at over the last couple of years, but haven't necessarily solved.
Yeah, thank you. So I grew up originally in sales management. I became a recruiter. It was called a headhunter back then, way back in the day, for a boutique search firm. And then I went to Oracle. I eventually ran all of go-to-market recruiting for North America. I'm at Oracle, and really I think that the original seedbed, if you will, for the idea behind HireBrain came to me at Oracle. And what struck me there, Oracle 2005 was a powerhouse, right? Arguably powerhouse today too, right? But growing very fast, acquiring a lot of companies. And as a younger person early in my career, what struck me that I did not know was that in general, nobody gets any training on how to become a manager, right? We promote individual contributors who are great at what they do in the management roles. And then the typical thing to do is the first thing you're asked to do is replace yourself. And so it really shouldn't shock us that in those circumstances, which happen hundreds of thousands of times, right, a year all around the globe, that we're left to our own devices and people improvise. And so it's interesting. How to hire is not taught in any college. There's not a college course on how to hire, any MBA program, anywhere in the world, which was a shock to me. But that is really the seedbed, if you will. That's the problem right there, is we walk into it, immediately we're asked to improvise. And then as we grow in our careers, every time we move up into another level, guess what? We're amateurs again. We've never done it before. People who used to be our peers, now we're hiring those folks, people in those roles to work for us. So that's what we set out to solve. And I think that is, at the end of the day, that's the problem.
It's funny because we're taught how to interview, right?
Yeah.
As potential employees, but actually training managers on how to interview, there's not a lot out there. And certainly there's as you get into larger organizations with outside recruiting firms and folks like what you used to do, that further disconnect between the manager and what's actually out there reaching out to the workforce. So let's talk a little bit about how HireBrain's approach is different.
Yeah, thanks. So that's interesting that you said that a lot of people do get exposure to interviewing training, right? But what we discovered was, even if you become a great interviewer, but you don't know what it is that you're looking for, you don't know success criteria for the role, you can do a fantastic job assessing candidates, but if it's not against the things that are actually predictors of success, then you can still get it wrong. right? So we took a different approach, and very early on, I built a science advisory team. People who are, some of them are globally famous in their fields: neurobiology, cognitive neuroscience, behavioral economics, to understand what are and how can we approach solving the problem differently. HireBrain started as a training program, hiring training. We call it a holistic training. There were 3 elements of it. Number 1 is the science of decision making. And that was fantastic, really, really fun the first time that I presented the science of decision making, how we make decisions about other humans. Some people, refer to bias, right? We talk about bias all the time. And normally when we talk about bias, it's from a particular viewpoint, if you will. But what we discovered, which was fascinating to me, is that most biases that cause problems in interview cycles aren't the ones that you think that are obvious. It's things like the halo effect, getting a referral, back channeling people. Do I know this individual? But that really makes sense if you think about it from an evolutionary perspective. Humans, right? When we meet somebody who's new, who we don't know, who doesn't come from a place that we came from, our brains are automatic. Well, all kinds of fear and anxiety is firing off in our brains. And when we're in that state, we're less able to make a rational, objective decision. Fascinating, right? One of our studies showed that both hiring managers and interviewees or candidates are both in a state, the very, very similar state of heightened fear and anxiety. And when you're in that state, you're less able to hear and process information. So you have 2 people who don't know each other, right, in this state of enhanced anxiety, who literally cannot hear each other or completely understand or process the information that we're getting. So is it a shock, right, when there's a mismatch? So that science of decision making. The middle part is not it's not new. It's effectively role design. It used to be called job analysis, right? Developed in the early part of the 1900s. So what we do is we help managers to shift the way that they think from a laundry list of things you want to see in a candidate into a forward-facing view of the job. What does somebody need to do in the role to be successful? What are the objectives of this position? What are the business problems that we're solving for? And we help them to create a 12 to 18-month plan of success. How are we measuring people? And then how are we as managers? What's our management style? What's our communication style? And those become, if you will, that work, that becomes our measuring stick. That's how we're measuring people. So we're literally helping people to shift the framework, the frames in their mind from a rearward facing view, a laundry list of things you want to see in a candidate, into what is the actual position. And then the third part is interviewing training, a conversational style, but reinforcing those messages that we've learned in those first 2 sections. So that's where we started. And then we started building complementary applications for managers to use before, during, and after a hiring cycle to ensure the highest probability of success.
Mm-hmm. Now, you guys won the HR Tech competition this year, the Pitch Fest, which is great. Congratulations. But you've been in the market for a couple of years now.
Yeah.
Product, right? So can you talk about sort of some of the successes that customers are seeing?
Sure. Yeah. So our software we've been in the market for a little over 2 years, just a little over 2 years. And in the beginning, it was definitely, there were 2 sides of it. It was efficiencies and it was also effectiveness. But the first business problem really was job descriptions. We still, find this today when we assess a company. We help them to assess their job descriptions that are live on their site. And we find, companies have dozens of different templates, right? Different orders of information, different kinds of information in job descriptions, spelling errors, grammatical errors, company acronyms, and then the most fun one to me is when we find at some organizations 10 or 15% of their job descriptions actually name a competitor right in the job description. And that happens because left to our own devices, I need to create a job description. We've got to get this live, go. Yeah, they go to a competitor's website. They're like, well, this one looks cool, download it, whatever. But human beings, right, trying to edit it, and they miss things. That was our first, that was the first business application, that we launched. And since then, we have, like I was sharing before, a whole suite of things for managers to use in the planning process, our intake technology, job descriptions, job advertising, scorecards, interview guides, et cetera, all built with company specific, context aware AI, which is very different than the approach that most organizations are taking.
Well, it seems like everybody's talking about, throwing AI, particularly at job descriptions. That seemed to be one of the early use cases that people got excited about. But beyond sort of consistency and not using your competitor's name in the job description, what is it about the methodology and the style of job descriptions that you're creating is maybe different from what folks have done in the past?
Sure. Yeah. So customers have a choice. They don't have to necessarily take all of our, it's the platform is built for them to use to help them to be effective and efficient. But for companies who want to infuse the methodology into their job descriptions, the reception is fantastic. And what do I mean by that reception? So, today the challenge is you're getting hundreds, if not thousands of applications, right, for every position. We're not finding an increase actually in the number of applications. It's either staying steady or it's actually a little bit of a drop. But here's the thing that's interesting. The candidates who are applying are of higher quality as it relates to the actual position. So high quality of candidate, people talk about quality of candidate. Usually what that means is companies who are coming from a certain type of an employer, if that makes sense, right? With a big name, big logo, universities as well, right? Person went to Carnegie Mellon.
Brands that they know, right?
Friends that they know. But when we talk about quality of candidate, quality of hire, it's somebody who is better qualified, if you will, to the actual job that needs to be done. And so what we believe is happening, we don't have enough data to say that this is in fact true, but what we believe and our customers believe is happening is that people are self-selecting out of the role because it's a realistic job preview. And that's the feedback we're getting from hired candidates and from managers. Like, this is the best job description I've ever seen. I could see myself in this position.
Because it's talking about what the performance objectives will be 6, 12, 18 months.
Yep.
Into the role in the description itself.
Yeah, right in the description.
What's skills we need to have to be successful?
The objective of the role, the challenge is to be solved for. So if I've done something the same or similar, or I'm inspired to solve that problem, then I'm more apt to apply. And then in the interviews process, not only is it more efficient, if you will, but it's also more effective because people are coming into that conversation with context. Like, this is the job. We're having a real business conversation about what the role is.
So how do you think about that? I know everybody's talking about sort of moving from a role-based or job-based to a skills-based approach today. How do you think about that in the context of what you're doing with HireBrain?
Yeah, when that conversation became more and more popular, the first thing that struck me is this is as pure play of a skills-based hiring program as you could possibly find, because the skills that are derived from the objective of the position and those milestones, that 12 to 18 month plan of success for the role, versus us just kind of trying to figure out or pull a bunch of different skills into a position. We also really encourage people to think beyond just the word skill. Think of it as skills, knowledge, and abilities. So just because you have and this is true for me too, right? If I take a LinkedIn learning course, right? Then my profile would say I have that skill. Well, I don't have that skill. I have the knowledge. Maybe I have the ability, but I haven't actually done it yet. Does that make sense? And so when we break it down further, what are the things that are absolutely necessary to be able to come in, right, and hit the ground running? Those are the skills, right? Abilities. Here are some things that we can train to, or maybe there's stretch opportunities for somebody. And knowledge, again, on training. Here are some things that I know, I'm aware of. I've knowledge. I've learned this, but I haven't applied it yet. And I think that is really, at the end of the day, that's the key to success in adopting a skills-based approach.
It's interesting because, we talk about performance as a measure of success in hiring, but you also talk about a couple of other factors.
Yeah.
How does that play into both the technology and sort of the philosophy around effective hiring?
Sure. Yeah. So in the beginning, early days, the original work, if you will, was studying enroll performers and then reverse engineering hiring criteria from those key factors. And so in the beginning, I would talk about performance and satisfaction. And so we measured that. Our goal is to encourage organizations, certainly the ones that we work with, to measure that criteria, if you will, 6 months, 12 months, 18 months plus post position. And then probably maybe 8 or 10 years ago, the word engagement, right, started coming around. And what's the difference between job satisfaction and engagement? Can we perform but not be engaged? The reality is that we can, right? It's true. So those are the 3 key factors: performance, engagement, and satisfaction.
And so how do you measure for potential engagement in an interview?
Yeah, that's interesting. So you can like the kind of the model that we built early days, there were 5 criteria for success. It was knowledge, skills, and abilities, attributes, that's how we behave, and desire, motivations. Those are the 5 key factors. And you can absolutely ask empirical based, so fact-based questions about motivation, what people are motivated by, and get discrete, specific examples. We call them in our world DBEs, or demonstrated behavioral examples of how they showed motivation, right, in their previous roles or previous opportunities, or even in school. I mean, this applies just as well to early in career hiring as it does to professional hiring.
So asking them questions about past experience and how they were motivated or otherwise engaged as an indicator of future performance.
Yeah, absolutely. Absolutely. The other thing that we encourage managers to give to make the interview a safer space or a braver space to allow a candidate to share their full experiences. And we find people, and I've experienced this myself, and I know lots of people who they have not been in a great environment before. They weren't motivated. They weren't engaged. It was not something that was fully conducive to success for them as a person. And a lot of times, any type of all of the programs and so on, that train or prepare candidates to interview, don't share negative things. Why are you leaving this role? Right? Well, because whatever you would like to say about your boss, but you'd never say it, right? That's why I'm leaving. But if we allow that and we understand and know, right, if we're prepared walking in to hear information that might be different, that's not all completely like a sales pitch, from a candidate, then we give people that opportunity. A full opportunity to get to know us and the role that we have to offer as well.
And you guys think about sort of references a bit differently as well, right?
Yeah, we do. This is a big discovery, that preparation before interviewing, preparation prior to hiring, right? Defining a role, defining those key criteria to enroll, success and engagement ahead of time. We orient our brains differently, and we can allow for a broader experience inside of an interview. And what do I mean by that? We can be prepared to hear information that candidates are trained not to share with us as managers. And the same thing goes for references. I think that references are challenging. We typically, share, the best people we think, who are going to tell us the best thing about our job.
Right.
But that's really not what's most helpful. It's really what's not. And what do I mean by that? If you have a greater understanding of who your candidate is, and if the candidate has a greater understanding of who you are, that first period of time, that 6 months, right, where we're figuring the place out, how do I communicate with this person? If those things are articulated ahead of time, then your relationship, that whatever, 6 to 12 months in figuring, out my manager and so on. That's shortened down to weeks. And I think that like that's when people experience it for the first time, it's like it's a breath of fresh air. We can't. It's interesting how effusive the praise is. Like, why did I ever do this, in any other way?
Is there a specific example when you talk about like creating a safe space? If you were just to give a word of advice to people hiring or maybe hiring for the first time today, without looking at software or anything else, are there
Sure.
things that you would say, here are things that you could do to improve your outcomes or the predictability of the performance of the people you hire?
Yeah, absolutely. So if we know that an interview for both myself as a manager, or if I'm a manager, as well as the candidate, is one that naturally puts our brains and our bodies in an advanced and a heightened state of fear and anxiety. If we know that walking in, then we can do things to change that dynamic right out of the gate, right? So number one is to build rapport with the candidate. Share something that is business relevant but personal to you. If there are things about yourself, your management style, your work style, etc., that have either been conducive to success or created challenges in your past, share those things. Like, for instance, I tell everybody, I'm a verbal communicator. I'm not good at it, but that's my go-to form of communication. I'm not a written communicator. I can only read and write so much in the course of a day. So if you are a written communicator and you need to write a book to me, then do it. But book a time and let's talk through it, right? Or you can read it to me. And I've had people take me up on that offer. I literally got a 5-page email. I'm like, whoa, then they booked a time, we get on. I've had people actually read word for word. And that's a beautiful thing. It's a beautiful experience for both parties, if that makes sense. And so that would be my best advice, like right out of the gate. How do I change the dynamic for myself as well as for the people that I'm interviewing? So I form a genuine connection, whether the role is right or not. You find yourself in a situation when you're like that, where you're able to share things with a candidate that most people don't. Like, this isn't the right role for you. This is not the right company. This isn't the right time. Or you really need to come. We would make a great team.
But admitting the vulnerabilities and not necessarily casting yourself as the manager in the best light is a tough thing for especially young managers to do.
I completely agree. I totally agree. But maybe I shouldn't say this story. Maybe it's a little provocative, but at Oracle, they called my team the Dirty Dozen. In the beginning, I had 12 recruiters, and they didn't dress the same. They didn't look the same. They were all different ages, different places that they came from. There was a ton of diversity on my team. And people ask the question, like, well, I don't understand. I'd say, well, we have a broad range of customers inside the company. We hire people for the role, right? For our team environment, but for the customer as well. So, when you see teams where everyone kind of seems like they dress alike, they almost kind of look alike, and so on. Is that really the experience? Is that the best experience for the customer? I think that as a manager, number one, I would just say this, again, maybe a little provocative, but don't go into management just because it's the next step in your career. If you don't have a burning desire to lead, if you don't have a burning desire to support, if you don't have a burning desire to train and to help people to learn and grow, don't do it. And remember that as a manager, you're not the customer, right? It's the people that they're doing the work for that are the main customer of the position. Does that kind of make sense the way I described that?
It does. It does. It certainly turns some things on its head on the way we traditionally.
I know.
You talk about sort of future-focused, outcome-based views of roles. How do you see kind of AI playing into that when we may not even know what roles we'll be hiring for 2 years or even a year from now?
Yeah. So we have a different philosophy and a different strategy at HireBrain. And I think that is why people find that the applications and the platform actually help them to do their job. That's probably the number one thing that we hear is, this actually helped me to do my job. And why is that? So how do I know what I'm going to hire for in the future? If you start with corporate strategy or your organizational strategy, your goals and your roadmap for success, we do that all the time, right? We build goals for 2025. We're doing that here at HireBrain, right? Most organizations do that. And if you view hiring the same way, then that strategy, those goals, the things that you're trying to accomplish in that timeline, those become your original criteria, if you will, to hire against, as opposed to thinking of it as, somebody just left and so I need to backfill. And I think that, I think I shared with you before, we have very interesting statistics, like people are using the platform 30 to 40% more than they have a current business need or current hiring need for. So they're using that role design process, that software, for two different things. One is they're planning for future hires. I'm building out my goal. I'm going and I'm going to build some role designs. I may not get 3 or 5 different positions maybe approved, but if I get 2, then I already have started that work. The other thing that people are doing with it, which we did not expect, is they're using it on their teams to build their own goals for next year and the goals for their teams. They're building out a 12-month plan of success for the role. And that's really, really interesting to me. I say sometimes that feels humbling, right? Because I built something that we built something that people are finding that kind of value from. But I think that that's really cool.
So using the tool really is part of a more kind of forward-looking performance review process than a lot of folks necessarily have today.
100%. And it is our goal that, we say before, during, and after. Number one is we highly, if for people who are doing role design, not all customers are using it, but for people who are doing role design, we highly encourage them to share that plan with their new hire at the time of start. They've got their plan laid out for them. And then our goal is for that to move into performance management software. So we're actually, as opposed to going into those review cycles and filling out the boxes and things like that, yeah, we've already had the conversation. This is a live conversation that we've had, continually. It doesn't matter if you hit all the marks. There are things going into a hiring process that are that come to pass, come true, right? But then business conditions change. Here's the beautiful thing. It doesn't matter. You're still going to make better hires, and your candidates are still going to have a far better experience because we've oriented ourselves to actual performance indicator, actual objectives.
Well, I think that's a great place to stop the serious part of this discussion today. We have a few minutes left.
Was it too serious?
It's crunch time.
Oh, okay.
We really need to get some music for crunch time.
Yeah, we do. I should have played something.
It would be appropriate. But this is the point where Patrick asks you a few questions.
Okay.
First, you ready, P? What is your favorite quality in a person?
Oh, interesting. Cleverness.
Cleverness. Can you be too clever?
I don't think so. But I definitely have a dark sense of humor. So,
who's your favorite fictional hero?
Oh, wow. That's tough. Golly. Huh. I'm more apt to think of people in history who I've been inspired by than fictional characters.
Okay.
I can't even think of one. Batman. Absolutely. Yeah, Michael Keaton, Batman.
Good choice. Good choice. Favorite historical hero then?
Oh, John Adams.
Oh, interesting. Why?
Well, people often ask the question, who was the greatest, president who set the standard, if you will. And people talk about Washington because he refused to be king, right? He walked out after 2 terms. But John Adams was the first president to lose an election. And walk away from the office. So Yeah.
A really good answer for today, dare I say.
Maybe that was super provocative. That didn't used to be a provocative answer to that question. So anybody who's not excited about that, or, that inspires some feelings, I apologize.
That's okay. Let's move on though. If you could be anyone or anything, what or who would you be?
Oh, so this is not an arrogant answer, but I would just be me. I couldn't be anybody else and do a very good job at it. I don't think I do a great job necessarily of being me either, but I definitely, I'm on a path, and I am a mission driven individual, and we've seen lives change. And so, yep, I'm going to have to just be me.
All right. Well, I think that's a great way to end it. David, thank you so much for joining us today. It was great to have you on The Crunch, and thanks to everyone for joining. See you soon.
Thanks for having me.